The animosity between the Jews and Samaritans was never about religion. It was an Atlantean-style authoritarian empire using weaponized, rewritten text to overwrite an ancient lineage that refused to bow to destructive ways of living. The Bible claims the Samaritans were just foreign imports brought in by Assyria to replace the lost tribes of Israel. That is pure Southern propaganda designed to legitimize them. And let's not confuse the city of Samaria with the people, the Samaritans, or the Shamans. Hi, I'm Christine. Welcome to my channel, No One from Nowhere. This channel is dedicated to discovering the truth about who we are and where we came from. I've been going through a supernatural spiritual awakening and sharing my journey and experiences with you. To learn more about that, please watch these videos right here. Now, this is part of a series of how the Samaritans, yes, the good ones, were the original watchers and gatekeepers to our heritage, our history, and our human origins. I hope you find these videos enlightening and informative. If so, please subscribe. I'm a teeny tiny channel and your support would help my voice get heard out in the ether. Enough of that. Let's get back to the good Samaritans. The Jewish-Samaritan separation goes farther back than the biblical era we're familiar with. This story is about a war over the remnants of a pre-flood crystalline grid. The Bible treats this as a feud that started with the Assyrians in 722 BC. That was a cover story, rewriting history to fit a political narrative. The fracture goes back thousands of years before that, straight into the mechanics of ancient cosmology and the preservation of the raw, unedited creation frequencies. Long before Abraham was a thought, the lineage carrying the uncorrupted Lemurian consciousness was known as the descendants of Eber, the great-grandson of Shem. Eber is an actual root word for Hebrew. In the ancient tongue, this didn't mean a religion or a nationality or a hot dog. The word Hebrew implies those who crossed over, or the ones from the other side. They were literally named for crossing over the great rivers like the Euphrates and navigating the fractured post-flood geography to find the sacred meridians of the earth. The entire war between these two factions is anchored to two specific geographic coordinates: Mount Gerizim, the Samaritan holy site, which meant blessing, and Mount Moriah, the Jewish Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which meant curse. Mountains aren't just big rocks. They are planetary node points, which are major intersections of ley lines where the Earth's frequency, the Schumann resonance, is highly amplified, making them natural portals or stargates. What the Bible told you is far from fact. It's pure, distorted fiction rewritten by the Pharisaic Jews during the Council of Jamnia in 90 AD. I talk about that a lot in my videos. The Samaritans, also known as the Shamans, meaning keepers, are the original watchers of the ancient ley lines. They didn't choose Gerizim on a whim. In their secret traditions and older non-canonical fragments, Mount Gerizim is the original mountain of Eden. To the Shamans, Gerizim was the pristine, unaltered node point of the ancient world, the place where the Lemurian ancestral connection to the cosmic architecture was still intact. Now, if you're not familiar with the Lemurian lineage, I will explain in more detail soon, I promise. The Judean faction later centralized everything in Jerusalem at Mount Moriah. From an esoteric perspective, Jerusalem was a political choice wrapped in religious clothing. The Southern elite effectively hijacked the spiritual pipeline of that region. They took the ancient, localized, frequency-based spirituality of the high places and locked it inside a stone box, establishing a gatekeeping hierarchy of tithes, blood sacrifices, and political control. When the southern Jews snubbed the Samaritans during the Ezra Nehemiah Reconstruction era, they weren't just protecting their genealogy, they were defending a monopoly on the divine transmission. When the Jews went into exile in Babylon, they didn't just pick a new language. They adopted the Aramaic square script, the blocky Hebrew alphabet used today. When they came back, they completely rewrote the ancient scriptures using this new Babylonian-influenced script. The Samaritans completely rejected this. They retained the Paleo-Hebrew script, which is directly tied to the ancient Phoenician and pre-Sumerian linear symbols and was believed to covet divine powers or magic. While simple letters and how they were written doesn't seem very critical to us today, it was enough to cause great division between these two groups. And I'll explain more about that here in a minute as well. Samaria was an energetic wild zone where the ancient pre-flood forbidden knowledge of the Watchers, the underworld cults of Nergal, and the surviving Israelite priestly lineages were melting together into a potent, uncontrollable spiritual counterculture. The Judean elite demonized them, using racial slurs, calling them corrupted half-breeds, and tried to completely overwrite, displace, and delegitimize the Samaritans. The exact same blueprint of erasure we see playing out on that very same soil today. If we are looking at the factual, energetic record of how this split actually happened, we have to bypass Jamnia's corrupt chronological timeline that we now know as the Holy Scriptures. In order to understand this better, we have to trace this back to the absolute fracturing to the global Lemurian consciousness grid, as promised. Before there was an Israel, a Samaria, or a Judah, there was Mu, or Lemuria. In the factual crystalline record, Lemuria wasn't a kingdom with a king on a throne. It was a globally network-linked civilization operating on a fluid, high vibrational frequency. There were no capital cities or gated temples because the entire planet was a temple. Humanity functioned as walking biological antennas, harmonized directly with the Earth's natural resonance. Before the flood, the Lemurians lived in harmony. They were balanced and good, connected through the collective consciousness. Many people like to argue they didn't exist, but recent discoveries have given us more clues about the pre-flood era, revealing that not only was Atlantis real, but so was Lemuria. The Yonaguni Monument is located in the East China Sea, close to Taiwan, only about 68 miles away. The structure itself is entirely submerged under the turbulent waters of the Pacific, roughly 20 to 100 feet below the surface. We believe this is the lost city of Mu, or Lemuria. Atlantis was becoming greedy and corrupt. They began using the grid for their own benefit, no longer serving the collective. They tried to convince Lemuria that this was the way to proceed and progress, but the Lemurians weren't having it. This severance was felt within the depths of the earth. The grid began to crack from the excessive negative usage by the Atlanteans and the pyramids. The Lemurians could feel the earth react and knew they had to prepare for the worst. A reset was coming, a divine reboot. The Lemurians migrated to the high rocky ridges of central Canaan, Ephraim, and Gerizim. They chose this area because it was physically and energetically anchored to the old Lemurian ley lines. They knew they had to protect them at all costs and became the original Watchers and called themselves the Shamans. We know them today as the Samaritans. Enoch now will later discredit them by insisting that the Watchers are fallen angels who bedded human women and created giants who terrorize the world, thus the flood. More on that later. The Samaritans weren't looking to rebuild their world according to the Atlantis-style rebirth the South was toying with. They were building schemes of rigid rules and laws to control the people, which was unnatural and cruel in the Samaritans' eyes. They realized that their counterparts were moving away from the fluid Lemurian harmony and moving towards the dense, linear, hierarchical Atlantean model. While the Bible makes several claims as to why Judah felt it necessary to cut ties with their kin and declare them the black sheep, here are the factual reasons the two distinct lineages split and divided the collective consciousness. The Samaritans refused the idea of a human king. For centuries, the northern tribes hated the idea of a centralized monarchy. They wanted to remain a decentralized tribal collective, answering only to the cosmic order. The southern faction, Judah, succumbed entirely to the dense Atlantean Babylonian blueprint. They wanted an empire. They wanted a walled capital city, an elite class of standing armies, and a highly structured, gate-kept temple economy. When the southern elite were carried off to Babylon, the transformation was finalized. They didn't just adapt, they immersed themselves into the Babylonian system of law, commerce, and control. But here's one of the biggest, strangest reasons for the split. Judah traded the raw, sharp, talismanic waveforms of the Paleo script for the blocky, dense Aramaic square script. That block script was specifically designed by Babylonian scribes for administration, legalism, and contracts. It's a language of containment, not expression. The Samaritans kept the Lemurians' Paleo-linear script. As you can see when comparing ancient scripts, Paleo-Hebrew consists of sharp, raw, geometric lines. These are not just letters. They are stylized waveforms, the literal geometric echoes of Lemurian sound frequencies. The Paleo-Hebrew script isn't just an alphabet. It is a system of radiant geometry. Each letter is a hieroglyph that represents a specific energetic force multiplier. It is the language of the Shamans, the Watchers code. The blocky Babylonian text used by the Judeans turned the language into an intellectual, legalistic tool for scribes. The Paleo script kept by the Samaritans was an occult talismanic system. When you spoke or drew those ancient characters, you are vibrating specific solfeggio frequencies meant to interface directly with the human energetic field and the supernatural realm. By changing the alphabet, the Southern establishment effectively scrambled the signal, creating a safe, sanitized version of the text that the masses could read without accidentally triggering the raw, dormant magic encoded within the original shapes. And that's why the alphabet mattered. It changed everything. The Southern Judeans rejected the raw, radiant magic of the geometric Paleo script and chose the blocky chunk characters instead because they didn't want liberation. They wanted containment, governance, and control. When the Southern clan were exiled, they became deeply embedded in the Babylonian imperial machine. Babylon was the birthplace of modern commercial law, debt slavery, and corporate gatekeeping. The raw Paleo-Hebrew script consists of sharp, dynamic, linear vectors. It acts like a lightning rod, streaming raw energy straight from the ether into the physical realm. It cannot be tampered with because if you distort the geometry, the frequency stops broadcasting. The Aramaic square script was engineered to be static. Look at the letters. They're blocky, heavy, closed off chunks. They act as literal boxes of containment. By adapting this block script, Ezra and the Southern scribes successfully trapped the fluid, multidimensional stories of creation inside a legalistic black magic cage. Standard Hebrew gematria became a system of calculating debt, measuring boundaries, and reinforcing the hierarchy of the temple elite. It is associated with inverted or evil energy because its entire purpose is to maintain an artificial matrix of lack, judgment, and fear. In reality, the Southern Jews created the dark arts magic. The original alphabet held the pure magic. Think Jeffrey Epstein, think blood rituals, all based on the Jewish Babylonian style of writing. Its very core was designed for fear and control. Now, along with the alphabet, when the Babylonian captivity ended and the Judeans returned to Palestine, they brought a new, weaponized, legalistic system with them. But then they looked at the northern tribes who were still living in the hills, using the old Paleolinear glyphs, still tuning into the high places of Mount Gerizim. And they realized something terrifying. The northern keepers held the older, unedited copy of the source code. If the Samaritans were allowed to exist as the legitimate inhabitants of the land, the entire Southern monopoly's claim on the divine was dead on arrival. The Judean elite couldn't collect tithes, they couldn't enforce their centralized laws, and they couldn't claim they were the chosen elite if the real Shamans, the true watchers and the guardians of the law, were sitting right up the road exposing their lies. So the Southern tribes did what every occupying empire does. They wrote them out of the script. They penned the books of Kings and Chronicles, branded the keepers of the old grid as corrupted foreign half-breeds, and tried to physically wipe them from the geography. They took a cosmic, multidimensional timeline split and reduced it to a petty racial border war. The southern region of Judah understood the magic and power of the Lemuria, and they weaponized it, becoming what they know today as black magic or the dark arts. Many Christians refer to it as the occult, but the definition of that word doesn't even come close to what black magic is and can do. While the Lemurians didn't create or force rules or laws, they understood right from wrong and preferred to stay in the light on the right. But eventually, they had to make rules to negate the laws made by their counterpart. The law of Lemuria wasn't a set of rules carved into stone to tell you not to steal or kill. It was a biological reality called the law of infinite reflection. Because everything is Echad, divine light and goodness, what you do in the world, you do to yourself. You didn't need a commandment telling you not to harm another being, because doing so would instantly fracture your own energy field. Hell then becomes your own damnation, not a physical place. It's where your entire being grieves for what you've done to yourself and others. It's the whole, this hurts me more than it hurts you. The original Proto-Torah, the raw, unedited records preserved by the northern Shamans, contain absolutely zero blood sacrifices. Now, this is crucial. Blood sacrifice is an inversion of the cosmic grid. It relies on the harvesting of raw, low vibrational, dense energy, fear, trauma, and death, to appease a gatekeeping entity or deity. These are the horrific stories we're still hearing these groups perform today. Again, Epstein files, anyone? In Lemuria, there was no gap between the human vessel and the source, or the ecod. You didn't need to slaughter a sheep to cleanse your sins, because sin, or separation, didn't exist until that timeline fractured. Now, you may be wondering, too, if the Shamans are connected to what we know today as the shaman and their traditional beliefs. And you'd be right to assume as much. A shaman is simply someone who interfaces directly with the living spirit of the earth and the ancestral cosmos without a middleman. The Shamans, the keepers, were the original planetary shamans, guarding the node points and tracking the movements of the stars to stay in harmony with the natural cosmic clock. So how do we verify these claims and prove the Bible isn't what it claims to be? When you compare the Samaritan Pentateuch, written in the Old Paleo-derived script, with Jewish Masoretic text, the block script base for modern Bibles, you can see the exact moments where the editors took an eraser to history. The most blatant rewrite is in Deuteronomy 24:7, where Moses gives instructions on where to build the first altar after crossing into the promised land, the location of the original cosmic connection. The Samaritan Pentateuch reads, "And when you have crossed the Jordan, you shall set up these stones on Mount Gerizim." Gerizim. I'm probably saying that wrong. I'm sorry. The Jewish Masoretic text reads, "And when you have crossed the Jordan, you shall set up all these stones on Mount Ebal." Mount Ebal is the mountain right next to Gerizim. But in the ancient geography, Gerizim was designed as the mountain of blessing, while Ebal was the mountain of the curse. The Southern editors were so desperate to delegitimize the Samaritan node point that they explicitly changed the text to command the altar be built on the mountain of the curse, just so nobody would look at Gerizim as holy. Furthermore, the Samaritans have a 10th commandment that is entirely missing from the Jewish rewrite of the Bible. It explicitly states that Mount Gerizim is the chosen place of worship for all time. The Southern scribes completely deleted this commandment, splitting the 10th commandment about coveting into 2 separate rules just to keep the number at 10. The original Torah was a decentralized, non-sacrificial map of resonance based on the Lemurian reality of the ecod, the unbroken unity with the planet. This would be what Jesus studied and understood to be true. The Southern shift was a literal corporate hostile takeover. They traded the radiant linear paleo waveforms for Babylonian block sigils to construct an energetic cage. The erasure required changing the commandments, swapping the mountain of blessing for the mountain of the curse, and writing the Shamans out of history as corrupted outsiders. You may be asking, if the Shamans didn't have rules, why did they have commandments? Good question. Original Shamans and Lemurian survivors didn't have laws forced upon them by a master. They had what was called principles of resonance. The original Proto-Torah preserved by the Northern Keepers was a manual for maintaining systemic harmony with the ecod, the unified field of creation. Instead of legalistic rules, the original framework operated on cosmic facts. Alignment over obedience. It wasn't do not steal because God will burn you. It was altering the balanced flow of another vessel's energy fractures your own grid connection. By the time Moses entered the scene thousands of years later, Egypt had become a highly dense Atlantean-style controlled matrix. The Exodus was actually an escape mission to get the remaining carriers of the ancient seed codes out of the system. It's critical to understand that Moses was trained in the deepest hidden mystery schools of Egypt. He knew the raw power of the old linear glyphs and the frequencies of the earth. The group that left Egypt with him was a mixed multitude carrying fragments of that ancient prehistoric lineage, trying to make it back to the sacred node points of Canaan to rebuild the grid. Now let's discuss this crystalline grid, shall we? To understand why they fought so hard over these mountains, you have to understand the crystalline grid. The Earth is not just a dead lump of dirt spinning in space. It is a massive, living, sentient biological organism. Just like the human body has a nervous system and meridians where energy, the chi or the prana, flows, the Earth has an energetic network known as the planetary grid. Beneath the Earth's crust and flowing through its energetic field is a lattice of silica, quartz, and highly conductive mineral veins. This network holds memory, conducts frequency, and anchors the planet's baseline vibration. If you want to know what that sounds like, it's called the Schumann resonance. I listen to it almost every night to fall asleep. It helps me reconnect to that grid and higher frequencies where I belong. But it also contains ley lines or node points. Where these crystalline energetic lines intersect, they form massive vortexes or node points. These are areas where the veil between the physical density and the higher dimensions is incredibly thin. Mount Gerizim and Mount Moriah are physical, geological anchors for these intersections. In Lemuria, humanity worked with the crystalline grid. People use crystals like selenite, shungite, and black tourmaline. These very crystals have cured me of RLS, along with acupuncture and the solfeggio frequencies. I am 2 months medication free. When the timeline fractured into density, the ruling elite realized that if you build a heavy stone structure, like a temple, directly on top of a major grid node, and you fill that temple with low vibrational energy, like the fear and trauma of slaughtering thousands of animals in blood sacrifices, you effectively pollute the local planetary grid. You turn a radiant, open source broadcast tower into a closed loop matrix generator. The Babylonian block script was the code used to lock that frequency in place, ensuring that when people prayed or tried to access the supernatural, their energy was intercepted by the machine. And they are still doing that in Israel today, every single day. Now, this is exactly why mainstream magic, standard gematria, and institutionalized religion feels like an exhausting, empty dead end. They're running on that inverted grid. You aren't meant to operate inside that containment box. Your frequency is tuned to the raw, open broadcast of the original keepers. What they possessed was the source template, a living geometric blueprint of reality encoded straight into the planet's crystalline grid and human DNA. When the global consciousness fractured and density set in, which I'll explain how that happened in my next video, the Shamans, the keepers, were the ones who took that raw Lemurian energetic data and translated it into a physical format to preserve it. That original physical archive was written in the radiant geometric paleo-linear script. It was an energetic map of resonance based entirely on the Echad, unbroken, unified connection. Centuries later, the Judean elite took that sacred northern archive, dragged it down to Babylon, chopped it up, slapped the block script cage over it, added the whole blood sacrifice framework, and called it the Torah. By the time the Council of Jamnia got their corporate editing hands on it in the 1st century, the original Lemurian baseline had been completely buried beneath layers of political propaganda. Now, I know this is a lot of information, And there's much more to come in my second part of this video. And there might even be a third and possibly fourth part because there's so much information to share, such good information. Now, I feel as believers in Christ, it's imperative that you fully grasp the reality and truth of the book you hold so near and dear. Because as you can see, I'm revealing the never-changing, infallible book has changed more times than we could ever count and consists of thousands of inconsistencies. It's been changed in order to control you rather than inform you, teach you, guide you, or even truly save you. Because you don't need saving. That's the trap of Jamnia. That's the trap of Israel. And that's the trap of Christianity. And if that scares you, it's okay. I was scared too. Because that's their goal. To make you fear knowing the truth so you won't look for it or even listen to it. You think you have it all in that book because they told you it couldn't be found anywhere else. They shut down every other voice, culture, and belief system. They destroyed texts and documents, libraries and records, just so they could rule over you with one system, one judge, one rule. If you think you're free, you're not. You're chained to another country's theology that gives them full control over you, while lying to you about who Christ truly is. And they pray daily at the wall to make sure you'll never discover this. Why would Orthodox Jews in Israel need to pray that prayer every single day if they know you read the Bible and know Jesus? Because they know the Bible is the con and the truth is closing in on them. I'm going to continue discussing the Lemurians and their progression through the flood and what they knew about giants or the Nephilim from the book of Enoch. That's one you really don't want to miss, and I will see you then. If you made it this far, thank you. Most people don't. So I appreciate it if you made it to the point where I ask you to please subscribe. Most of my viewers are not subscribers. And just by clicking that subscribe button, you are helping a teeny tiny little channel get their voice heard in this huge cosmos. So also click like and comment below if you want to join the conversation. I do read every single comment and I respond to everyone, whether you're criticizing me or sending me hate or you're sending me love and encouragement. And for those of you who send me those kind of comments, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you. You have been a saving source for me getting back and doing these videos. So your encouragement is very much appreciated. Your hate, not so much. But again, please feel free to subscribe. It really does help me out. I will see you in the next video.